It's been raining every day. Today is no exception. I take advantage of a break in the rain. So I go out for my usual nightly walk. After 25 years working in the creative industry, I got laid off. Design, music, video, branding, everything I know how to do, everything I am, comes from that. A couple of years ago, an agency in Shanghai decided it no longer needed me. This isn't a victim story. It's the story of how I built a 25-year career, crossing 3 continents, and of how, in the end, the very technology I was learning to use ended up pushing me out the door. Let's start from the beginning. Hi, I'm Chilli. This time, I'm not going to talk about food or my daughter. I'm going to talk about why I got laid off. I grew up surrounded by creativity. It wasn't a choice. It was the air I breathed. My older brother put music in my veins since I was 6 or 7 years old. Rock in Spanish, mostly, then rock in English. There was always a record player going in the house. At the same time, I drew comics at school. The anatomy of an eye copied from a book in elementary school. Skull t-shirts that got me in trouble in class. Around that time, my sister started studying graphic design in an era when there were almost no computers. School years went by fast. I finished studying graphic design. In 2001, before finishing my degree, I started working in the creative industry, designing websites with a few childhood friends. Soon after, I moved to London in 2004, starting from zero, waiting tables, learning things on my own. There, I ended up designing restaurants for an Italian chain. Then the financial crisis of 2008 hit close to home. I went back to Colombia and ended up arriving in Shanghai in 2009. There, I ended up working as creative director in the wine industry, traveling all over China. In 2020, the pandemic hit. We traveled to Colombia with my girlfriend at the time, right when the first COVID case appeared in Wuhan. We barely made it out of China. My girlfriend managed to get back just before Colombia closed its airports. I got stuck in Bogotá, locked down at my dad's place until November. 10 months apart. And I remember at some point during those months, she doubted whether to stay with me or not. I returned to Shanghai at the end of 2020 without a job, just doing freelance projects. That's when I started posting on LinkedIn. A Frenchman saw one of those posts. He owned an agency and was looking for someone who spoke Spanish. So we had an interview, and a few days later he hired me. I was, without exaggeration, at the highest point of my career. I was starting a new job as art director at this big agency. I began working with this agency in the middle of 2021. I worked with Chinese colleagues and also with some incredibly talented and creative foreigners. I enjoyed it a lot. Then, in early 2022, I remember it perfectly. It was February 2nd, 2022. That day, my girlfriend at the time told me she was pregnant. In July 2022, we got married in southern China, where my wife is from. In October 2022, in the middle of a COVID lockdown that lasted more than six months in Shanghai. My daughter was born, and just a month after my daughter was born, a colleague at the office showed me something called ChatGPT. I thought, wow, this is incredible. And at the same time, Something inside me went cold. Chilling is the word. Around the same time, models like Midjourney started coming out. Hyper-realistic images generated in seconds. And here, again, I want to stop and think out loud, because this wasn't just technical curiosity. More than 30 years earlier, as a kid, I drew because there was no other way to get an idea onto paper. I learned web design over dial-up because there was no other way to learn it. Every tool I used in my career, the camera, Photoshop, SketchUp, I learned because it was the only door available to do what I wanted to do. And suddenly a tool appears that didn't need me to learn anything. That could do, in seconds, what had taken me more than 25 years to master, without asking my permission. I started asking myself questions I'd never asked before. If creativity no longer depends on the technique you've mastered, what's left of me in my work? Was I the creative one, or was I simply someone who knew how to use the tools that existed at that moment in history? I still don't have a clear answer. I keep thinking about it almost every day. My daughter was barely 6 months old. The agency began to lay off staff. The economy, especially for creative agencies, was going through a very difficult time all over the world. They did not extend my contract, and this time it was different from 2008. In 2008, I was 30 years old. I didn't have a daughter, and the feeling was one of adventure, more or less like, well, and now what follows? This time I was 45 years old, a 6-month-old daughter, a wife, and a completely different feeling. Real fear. The type of fear that is felt not in the stomach, but in the back of the neck. Do I blame artificial intelligence? Not entirely, but I do believe it was a factor. The economy hit first. Why keep someone who takes a week on something that the machine resolves in an afternoon? I stayed once again in this no man's land territory that I spoke about before, without a fixed job, without a clear plan, with a daughter who was barely starting to hold her head up, and a dad who didn't know what he was going to be able to offer her. And here is the part that costs me the most to say out loud. During several weeks, I felt shame, not sadness, shame. 25 years building a career. And suddenly I felt that I had to explain to people why at my age I was unemployed, as if it were my fault, as if 2008 hadn't already taught me that being redundant didn't mean that one did something wrong. It took me time to remind myself of that. And here is the part that seems most honest to tell. I don't know if artificial intelligence had not entered my life right at this moment. Probably I wouldn't have come so far with this channel, with these videos that you are watching right now. I use artificial intelligence every day to organize ideas, for scripts, for editing. The same tool that removed me from a job is the same one that gave me a new one. I don't know if they fired me or if I fired myself, changing my way of thinking. I don't know if I was laid off or if I laid myself off. By changing the way I think, figuring out how to move forward with what was in front of me. I've spent months turning this over in my mind. And the most honest thing I can say is both things are true at the same time. I got laid off, yes. But I've also spent 25 years laying myself off from every place where I felt comfortable, long before anyone else did it for me. Bogotá, London, Shanghai, Taipei, Shanghai again. I was the one who pushed open almost every one of those doors. What changed this time is that I wasn't the one who decided the moment. And that difference between choosing the change and letting the change choose you is, I think, the biggest lesson of these 25 years. I think about my daughter. I think that someday she too will have to reinvent herself, probably several times, in a world with tools I can't even imagine yet. And the only thing I truly want her to know when she's old enough to watch this video is this, that losing the job, the title, the role isn't the same as losing yourself. That in each of those 5 times, I had to start from zero. The only thing that crossed from one side to the other intact was me. I don't know what's going to happen with creativity in the next 5 years. Nobody knows. And anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But there is something these 25 years have taught me. And that only now, past the midpoint of my life, I'm truly starting to understand. It's that you're not defined by the job you have. You're defined by what you do when that job disappears. Has artificial intelligence affected your work too? Or have you gone through something like this starting from zero? Tell me in the comments. I really want to read them. This time more than ever. See you in the next video. Bye bye.